Hello, and welcome to the Disability Myth. My name is Dominic, and I live with a fatal disease called spinal muscular atrophy. Together, my amazing caretaker, co-host, and best friend, Uriel, and I plan to debunk misconceptions, share our personal experiences, and shatter your expectations. But we're not stopping there. We're bringing in experts, thought leaders, and everyday people who are smashing through societal barriers, paving the way for a more inclusive world. Whether you're tuning in to learn, empathize, or simply to be entertained, the show promises to be an eye-opening experience that transcends boundaries. Because when it comes down to it, what makes us different is what makes us extraordinary. Whoa!
Hi.
Welcome back to another episode
Of
The Disability Myth,
yeah.
Season 3,
Three.
Episode 1.
First one.
Let's
It's been a
go.
while. Tell the people. It's been about what, a month and a half since we concluded
Maybe 2.
season 2?
Yeah, maybe 2 months. Yeah,
Maybe two, oh my gosh, 2 months? Oh
we
no, how
really,
could we?
we really got caught slacking.
Oh, at least I did. Oh, I almost failed a couple of classes. I'm like, oh shoot. Clowning around.
It's casual. We all fail a
Yeah.
class or two in our lives.
Oh yeah. So we have an important guest today.
We do have an amazing guest today in the form of Skylar Covich,
Ooh.
a member of the Braille Institute, a musician, a former academic with a PhD in political science, and member of the Santa Barbara Access Advisory Board. So, welcome on, Skylar.
Thank you. It's great to be here this weekend.
Glad to have you on. Excited to talk to you, and we're excited to let people learn more about you because I first met you on the Cottage Outlook speaker series,
Mhm.
and you were on the presentation board, and you were talking about your job at the Braille Institute, and I thought, man, this is so cool. Like,
Oh yeah.
you kind of just taught me a lot in that short little 30-minute spiel. And I thought, a lot of other people could probably benefit from this. And so I'm just, again, glad that you were able to get on the show, and we're happy to have you.
Great. Thank you. It's great to be here. Yeah, really uh, was great to be on that call. And it's you never know how you're going to end up making a connection with someone. And
Yeah.
so yeah, I was really glad that we were able to follow up from that too.
Yeah, exactly. All right. Well, without further ado, I think it's time we jump into our world-class icebreakers that
Which is we got a couple of new ones this
we
season.
we do.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we went back and forth on it, and then I thought, oh, that's goofy enough. Sure, we'll try it. I mean,
All right. No more just Coke and Pepsi or pineapple on pizza, folks. We're
oh, that's
we're
right.
evolving. So, Skylar, the zombie apocalypse is coming. Who are 3 people that you want to try and survive with?
Yeah, that's a tough one. It's far, at first I was thinking about, people who have specific skills, but I mean, family, especially in these recent years, has been really important to me. So my wife and almost 3-year-old son Peter, and then we have our baby son coming up in August. They're most important people to survive with, and we'll see what our younger son is like. But I know that my wife and older son have lots of good instincts when it comes to you know, and I don't know if I would say survival. We haven't been in that situation, but being uh, aware of what's around them and uh, my wife is really good at understanding what is going to be a good way to store food and that kind of thing. And my son has a lot of really good like situational awareness and curiosity and you know willingness to help already at an early age. So yeah, that's kind of my thinking on that.
Yeah,
That's
okay.
awesome. Those are all like really good traits to have,
That's such a wholesome response that I was
Yeah.
not expecting. Like when I wrote these questions out the first time,
Yeah.
I was thinking, if I was in this situation where somebody asked me who I would want to survive with in the zombie apocalypse, my
No,
first
don't pick
instinct,
me, bro.
yeah.
Don't pick me.
Oh,
My first instinct is like Keanu Reeves or like Dwayne The Rock Johnson, just
Oh, you're
like
cheating. Well, they're just actors. You don't actually know if they're just people.
I guess I just assumed that they're like that. I don't know, but they are. And
Oh, you think you're
Or
getting
at least
John
a
Wick with
character,
the package?
yeah,
or at least a person with similar skills and things like that. But now that I think about it, have there been many movies or books or whatnot where people have like more severe disabilities and like are able to survive? I know there's been a
I,
few about blind people, but
yeah. I've seen quite a few horror films, zombie films, and media, but I can't recall specifically people with disabilities getting much representation in them. What about you, Rudy?
right. I mean,
Oh
people get
God.
hurt, they might like have a temporary problem, but someone who already was disabled, kind of a
Yeah.
difference. Yeah.
Oh, one that comes to mind that I actually watched recently, was, have you seen Bird Box?
Yeah, I'm not familiar with that.
Bird Box, basically, uh, there's some type of what you would they initially thought was like a pandemic, where there was this entity that would appear in front of people and drive them to commit suicide in just mass, right? So if you saw it, you were dead. Yeah, like if it got in front of you and your eyes were
Wow.
open, kind of think like, what is it, Medusa? Where
Oh, with
Oh,
the
yeah.
the stone effect, the
right,
visual.
except you just die, like you kill yourself. You're driven to just suddenly find a way to die.
Okay.
So in the movie though, um, without spoiling too much,
Yeah, for the audience.
yeah,
Yeah.
uh, the people who survive are from a Braille Institute, the blind.
Really? Oh,
Yeah,
because they can't see it. Okay, yeah.
exactly. Exactly.
Huh.
Okay.
And it was this whole thing where like they played out the whole movie and then at the end like, oh yeah, blind people are fine. It's just like, oh, that's kind
Well,
of cool.
I was thinking The Quiet Place with the he was on The
Yes.
Office. He had directed it.
Krasinski? Is
I
that his
think
name?
so. It's like these alien creatures that hunt on
Based on sound.
based on sound. And I believe in that film there is a little girl who is deaf,
Hmm.
I believe,
Yeah,
and how that affects her surroundings in this world, how she's not necessarily aware of the noise she's making.
right.
What else? I know Walking Dead's probably the bigger or most popular zombie media, but
Hmm.
at one point Rick develops a bad leg, right?
I honestly can't remember. It's
Like,
been so
wasn't
long since I watched
he,
it.
didn't he have a, oh, gosh. And I know his son lost an eye.
Yeah, he had an eye patch that he wore. He had lost an eye somehow. I forget. Yeah.
Yeah, but those are kind of, well, yeah,
Again,
debilitating, but
right. Yeah, so
can't
that's a good
really,
point. I feel like those movies that we mentioned too are so good.
yeah, I like The Quiet Place.
So
That's a
like
good one.
more disability representation in horror films. Let's go.
What's, it'd be cool to see more of it because of how complex it could possibly be because a lot of because when people write things and stories sometimes it comes there's a little bit of bias where it's like, oh, I can relate to my experiences
Yeah,
and put it into work for my writing,
right,
but for you have a completely different experience. For me, like you and Skylar, are have a completely different perspective that I can't tune
right,
into.
right.
Things that I might not be aware of might be more, what's the term, like anxiety inducing or fearful for you guys.
I mean, you know me, I've got anxiety through the roof.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, they definitely have some as well. And yeah, and then of course when people do try to write, then they can, it does get picked apart a bit, like whether it was the correct representation, which uh even within the disability community. And then for the blindness, it is also for literature, it's kind of just people can uh, just examine the writing, who might be blind. But for film, it does depend more on description. And of course, there's much better audio description now than there was. But it's kind of an interesting element to it.
Right. Yeah. Okay, and moving on to our other very sci-fi question. I don't know, these icebreakers are very sci-fi-y. How did we get balloons on our screen? That was wild.
Oh,
I don't know what that was, but cool.
happy birthday, Dom.
Happy
No.
birthday. If you had a time machine, Skylar, would you go back in time or go into the future?
Wow. And I guess it would be taking out the worry of like whether you would be changing anything.
Disrupting the
Uh,
space-time
yeah,
continuum.
yeah,
Yeah,
yeah. I guess probably going back into the past. I mean, we know that there is like a very specifically, things that we know have happened in the past that it might be really interesting to go and uh, really experience how it actually was. For the future, it just seems so much more unknown and uncertain, like what you'll find there.
I talked to Dom about this, and I think Dom, you were a future man, right? You would rather go to the future?
I think so, just because the same reason Skylar mentioned about not going to the future and instead going into the past, the uncertainty of it. Because it's like, whoa, what would you find if you went into the future? You know, the thought of it is kind of exciting.
Right.
Yeah, yeah, I guess more scary than exciting to me. Yeah,
What?
I've also thought about what if people 100 years ago could go into the future, like when it comes to technology, especially, or even
Yeah.
social, issues going on. There's probably some things that were exactly the way that they would have imagined, and other things that are completely different in
Imagine
where we made
showing,
progress and where we didn't.
yeah,
Right.
imagine showing Alexander Graham Bell an iPhone.
Oh yeah,
My, I think I decided to go to the past because the thought of going to the future and learning information or the future of humanity and then coming back to present, I feel would be too much of a burden for me to handle.
True, I didn't think
yeah,
about that. Like the
It's like,
yeah. That
psychological
was my thought.
yeah,
implications.
like, oh, then you like either optimistic or nihilism, who knows, right?
Yeah,
Depending on like what you see and what you find out. And
true.
now you have to live with
Exactly.
that, which is pretty terrifying,
Yeah.
right? It's like, oh man.
Oh,
Well, I guess it depends on how far in the future you want to go and what you want to
yeah.
learn, right? Because you go 10 years in the future and it might not be as crazy.
Yeah.
But if you go 50 years in the future, it's like, whoa, this is really crazy what happened.
Right, right.
But yeah, anyway.
Yeah, it's interesting. Like if we had gone 10 years into the future, say 10 years ago, like with from this point in 2024, it's like everything feels like a bit of a holding pattern. Like, yeah, I mean the pandemic was scary, but we did end up getting through it, and as a society, kind of getting back to normal for the most part.
Right, right. Yeah. No, it's a good
You
point.
never know where you are.
Okay, guys. Final icebreaker. This is an oldie but a goodie. It's a classic. Best piece of advice you've ever been given, Skylar.
I think really trying to learn from everyone that you come across, like whether you disagree with them or not, or like have a very different perspective. And it's really helped me a lot in my work too, because and in my journey with being uh, with a disability, because like you never know exactly what someone is going through and why they come to the ideas that they have, and you can kind of speak up when something is really wrong, but it's also important to work with people, who are very different from you.
Right. Oh, I like that.
I mean, that's a
Yeah.
fantastic advice. Especially it's definitely a skill that people should talk about more. Just even that's if you can even get adjacent with that when it comes to like media literacy, this, that, where it's understanding because it's so easy to listen to other person's experience or their opinions and get mad at them directly.
Hmm.
But it's easy to do that, but it's hard to like take a step back and realize how they form that opinion and why they're like that and understanding, you know,
Yeah.
approaching it kind of a little bit more empathetically instead of like a right wrong because everything's a shade of gray essentially,
Right.
you know.
Right. And so some of it's, big social questions, but other than it's also like in my work, I realized that I can't just recommend the exact same things to people, who weren't totally blind since birth, in the same order necessarily. You
Mm,
know, like people who are losing their vision or just lost all of their vision really suddenly and dramatically, like, or maybe they're losing it gradually. Like you have to kind of think of what different pieces of advice to give them.
yeah, that's a good point. I never thought
It
about
can be a
that.
lot.
This gets brought up a couple of times, but Dominic has had, I believe you as well, Skylar, if you mentioned both of you have had a whole lifetime with your conditions.
Hmm.
And then sometimes Dominic and I speak to people that are newly paralyzed and how there's quite a few differences. And like for you, like you've already grew accustomed to it. You've always known it
Yeah,
and you've worked around it. But someone that's like newly blind or
right. Well,
disabled, that's quite jarring,
yeah,
you
no,
know.
I think
Right.
the
But
biggest. Go ahead, Skylar.
go ahead.
Oh, I was just gonna say, I think the biggest hurdle for a lot of people that are newly disabled is just accepting, obviously, their new normal and being born with a hereditary condition, genetic condition. eh, I think, I don't know about you, but I was just kind of forced at a young age to accept it and understand my limitations and so what, keep living my life, you know?
Right. But did it degenerate over time for you at all? Or have you just always had the same limitations?
So I've slowly, over the course first 18 years of my life, lost mobility. And the reason for that is because, as you mentioned, SMA is degenerative. So when I was a toddler, I could crawl and stuff like that and move around and be a lot more independent. Whereas now my main source of independence and mobility is my power chair.
Right.
And I do rely on people like Uriel and my caregivers for all my activities of daily living. Um, but the progression of my disease has halted essentially because of the Spinraza injections that I get every 4 months. And those were approved back in 2016 or 17, I believe, by the
Yeah.
FDA.
Right.
So yeah, that was like I was 18, 19 years old around there when I first got them. So since then, the degenerative nature of my SMA has kind of slowed down a bit. And
Right. That is good. Yeah, I mean, I was born blind except for light perception, so it's not degenerative. I also don't have any other serious health problems. And but I guess that there's a few interesting questions here about how we think about disability. Like,
yeah.
first of all, like a lot of blind people and I think other disabled people with a disability too get really upset if people think that we're heroic or
Hmm.
uh, feel really sorry for us or anything like that. And I get that. Obviously, it can be annoying, but I also understand, like, if I lost uh, the use of my legs or needed a caretaker or anything, I would definitely find it very difficult to adjust, even if I actually gained some vision back.
Right.
Like for me, walking, being able to walk is such a huge part of my identity. And so on
Right.
some level, I get why people, who aren't blind might have these thoughts about blind people. And it doesn't mean that we shouldn't fight ableism. We definitely should, but I also understand why people have these feelings of feeling sorry for people because we all just have our things that we value that we are able to do.
Yeah, no, that's
And
interesting to mention that. Like,
Because I know sometimes you get a little mad when people like call you an inspiration and whatnot. It's because it's like they're congratulating you on something
yeah,
that you are. It's been your whole existence, so you feel weird to be praised for it.
right. Well, and
yeah,
I'm getting ready to do a radio program on inspiration porn in the next month. And, like for those who aren't familiar, inspiration porn is basically what Skylar just um talked about. It's like a cultural communicative phenomenon where people raise those with disabilities for just doing ordinary things that anybody else does. Like, for example, going to the grocery store, going to get your mail, going to get a drink with a friend or food, whatnot. People sometimes will see that if they're not as familiar with those with disabilities and, using their assumptions, which tell them that living with a disability is a bad thing, they jump to that conclusion of, wow, you're so brave. You're so inspirational for, you know, meandering about getting food and whatnot, right? Living your life. And it feigns ignorance, right? Which is not necessarily
Right.
their fault. It's, a circumstance of not being familiar with those with disabilities. And that's, again, I feel like I say this every episode. But that's the point of this whole podcast.
Yeah.
We want to kind of bridge that gap in understanding for those that are interested and willing to listen. So, yeah, no, and back to what you had mentioned too, I hadn't really thought about that. The fact that you said even if you could gain some sight back, losing the ability to walk would be not worth it to you, which is like,
Yeah.
yeah, that says a lot. And I hadn't thought about that.
Yeah. I mean, would you feel the same way, the opposite, I guess, if you were not able to see, but you were able to uh,
Right,
walk or do other things that you had lost the ability to do.
right,
Uh, yeah, I think a lot of us are just so used to the way that we are. And I mean, even for healing in general. So like there's been a lot of talk about healing through science. Is there going to be research that was going to allow for a partial or complete cure? And there's also been like, supernatural attempts at healing, like by people who think they're going to pray for it and it's going to happen.
right,
And for both of those, I would say never, but I'm also not sitting around waiting for it. You know, it's
right. So on this kind of topic, obviously there's a lot of misconceptions about being blind, and that's the whole other point of the podcast, right? Is to clear up those misconceptions, bridge
right.
that gap. So yeah, I'll just kind of let you kind of talk about some of the main misconceptions that you've experienced about living with being blind.
Right. Yeah, I guess the different abilities of blind people, kind of depend on some other aptitudes. Like, for example, some blind people are very good at spatial awareness, which makes it a bit easier for them to cook, uh, you know, hang clothes up in a straight way instead of a crooked way. You know, very good sense of direction, even if it's not a place that they know. My ways of adapting to blindness are more based on memorization and hearing. So I was very good at, like, for example, history and English class in school. I can remember how to do a lot of things with technology, like get around different computer apps and phone apps. Uh, I can memorize routes and like be able, once I know the route, I just kind of go off based on muscle memory of how to get somewhere. And of course, my cane is very important, but you know, a lot of it is the muscle memory. So it from my experience, it seems like people often have one or the other. So I struggle more with more of the spatial things like cooking. And
Gotcha.
so what blind people are able to do, it can depend on other health challenges or disabilities that they have, or it can have more to do with whether that more of that still kind of a visual learner or whether they're more of an auditory learner.
So just like anything else, there's just variability. It kind of varies among the people in the
Definitely.
yeah.
Yeah. And some of that might also go to whether someone prefers to use a cane or a dog. Uh, for blind adults. Now, first of all, blind children are not allowed to have guide dogs pretty much. If we're blind from childhood, we learn cane travel. Uh, so a lot of adults, though, first of all, for people like me who don't have a dog, people might wonder why. And I would say that using the dog does require you to give up a little bit more control over where you go. So you can't just decide to stop if you feel like you need to stop. Well, I mean, I guess you can. Like there's, you know, probably a lot of dog. If you had someone with a dog on the podcast, they would be able to speak to it, of course, a lot more thoroughly. But so yes, you can tell the dog to stop, and it will. And like, but you have to keep up an extreme discipline of training in order to get to that point.
Right.
And for me, like my you know, I guess I'm a lot more of an individualist that way, where I feel like I need to have complete control of starting and stopping, unless I know that I have a human, a guide who's helping me.
Right. Okay.
That makes sense. Just like
Yeah,
you want more independence and you're fairly
right.
confident in yourself.
Yeah.
And when you want to stop and do something, you don't necessarily want to feel the pull or this other creature just kind of guiding you,
Yeah.
which makes sense.
Well, if I'm putting myself in, say, like Skylar's shoes, and I am trying to use a guide dog, that's just another variable that I have to account for.
You're right.
It just adds more stress to me. Like, is the dog okay? Is the dog like going in the right direction? Like, is somebody looking at my dog weird as if they're gonna take it? Like,
Exactly. Yeah.
Yeah. And now
yeah,
I know a little bit more like that, what that's like being a father. But
right.
uh, yeah, but it's definitely a somewhat of a trade-off because the dog can get you past some obstacles, that it's trained to do that you might be a little bit harder for a cane user. And when I've gone to conferences for the blind, I've definitely been able to notice how that works. But yeah, I'm definitely very strongly a cane user. And
Gotcha.
yeah,
Well, and the whole point, if I'm not mistaken, behind the cane and the guide dog, obviously, is to increase your independence to allow you to do more. So, when we talked to you initially, you said something that stood out to me that kind of aligns here, and that was, that there's more to life than people probably think. And obviously, like your cane is a good example of, a tool that you can use to get more out of life. And yeah, do you mind touching on that? Like when you said there's more to life.
exactly. Yeah. I mean, I do think blindness has changed a lot about the way that I live, but I'm very glad that I've been able to be involved in so much more than it's just about blindness issues. Uh, but it's interesting that I was reading a book called The Country of the Blind by Andrew Leland, who's a low vision uh, author. And so he still has some sight left as of now. And he was talking about how the cane can be useful for people who have a little bit more vision as a way to tell others that they might need more space, even if they can still see some. So that
Gotcha.
was kind of a different way of looking at it for me. So yeah, my job with the Braille Institute is as the technology program lead, and so I started about 3 years ago at in 2021 at the Santa Barbara Center, kind of as an access technology instructor, not as a program lead. And for the first year or so, I was working from home, as it took a while for us to open back up after the pandemic. And then I started going into the office more. And soon after that, I got promoted to this program lead position. Uh,
Okay.
and this is my first job in the field of blindness. Uh, we can kind of talk about my background in political science, uh, uh, which was what I did before. So I'm in my 30s now. And so starting in the blindness field after some time away is actually pretty common. In the same book that I mentioned, The Country of the Blind by Andrew Leland, there was also, some similar stories about, people who had done that.
Okay.
So my job as an instructor is to teach one-on-ones, which are often in person now. where I, sit down with someone and figure out how they can more accessibly use their phone or their computer. And so I do have a lot of people who still have some vision left, so I have to know the basics of how to do even the low vision settings, like magnifying their screen. But most of what I focus on is the screen readers. So either getting the phone to talk to you with Siri or Google Assistant, or for you to talk to your phone. So for an iPhone user, which I am, you can talk to your phone with Siri, or you can navigate the screen using VoiceOver, and it will talk to you. And then for computers, I've always been a Windows user. There's a few different screen readers where it'll, if you type and if you press the right commands, the computer will talk and read what's on the screen.
Okay.
So JAWS is the one that I use. And I do a little bit with Braille devices as well, where you can actually put whatever is on the computer or phone into Braille too. But a lot of the people don't know Braille who come to the Braille Institute because usually because they're more newly blinded or not even actually fully blind yet.
Okay. Okay.
So, so I mean, that's my Santa Barbara part of my job. I also teach them online classes on VoiceOver and JAWS. And then for my lead part of the job, I supervise other tech instructors who live in other parts of Southern California. And there's also some kind of partnership things. Like for the first time, we had a booth at the CSUN conference in Anaheim, which is one of the main assistive technology conferences in the country.
That's cool.
Wow.
I have a couple of questions based off all of that. Using like Siri or using um JAWS, what are like the biggest challenges of just having a voice read out to you what's on your screen?
Yeah, it's something that I'm used to, but a lot of the major problems are if it is a PDF or an image, sometimes it won't read it out correctly. I'm just so used to the robotic nature of the voice, and that has improved over time too. So yeah, it's been interesting to see what issues other people have that I might not have thought of, like, having the confidence to speak to Siri, and, like not being nervous about it, maybe especially for older people. Certain websites are a lot easier to navigate with certain keyboard shortcuts to be able to find what you're looking for on the website.
Gotcha.
Yeah, so I've been kind of teaching people more advanced skills with that.
I,
And even with pictures, the AI apps on the phone are able to describe them a lot better,
yeah,
even if
yeah.
it takes a little longer.
We had that written down on the outline. We
Yeah.
wanted to ask you about that. How does that work? Image descriptions with the AI software.
So you can go into there's a couple different apps. There's one called Be My Eyes. There's one called Seeing AI. And if you take a picture, it will read out a description of what's in the room. But you can focus it more narrowly on that, like taking a picture of the screen or of a piece of paper, or even a picture of a picture. So you take the picture that maybe someone has texted you, and then you share it with the app,
Yeah,
and it gives a description of it.
that's really cool.
Yeah, it's really developed even just in the last year. So I've been able to network and get Braille Institute's name out there as a trainer on
Yeah.
these apps.
I bet, especially with like the innovations of like ChatGPT and all the
Yeah,
AIs coming out now.
exactly. And it is good that, the Braille Institute is able to do some remote services for people, even who are not in Southern California near any of our centers. And so
Yeah.
that makes a lot of the companies that make these apps interested in talking to us too.
Going going back to the Braille aspect of your job, like I think you had initially asked it, right, Rudy, about what's the most what's the easiest path of entry, right, to like learning Braille.
Oh, right. Because I'm just not aware of it. I feel like
Right.
people listening uh, might not be, might not understand Braille.
Mhm.
And it's just coming from ignorance, just like out of curiosity, because it's, oh, do you approach it ABC, that type of thing, from
Yeah,
people.
yeah. And I learned when I was a kid, when I was about 5 years old. And so I think I did learn each letter of the alphabet. Now I do have to teach Braille a little bit as a part of my job. It's something I find challenging, like to make sure that people are tracking correctly with the specific line of Braille that they're supposed to be reading, so I can figure out whether they've gotten it or not. So I've just done it for a couple of people now. I think there are some curriculums where they do want you to start learning words within the first few letters. So like maybe you'll learn A, B, C, and then the word cab, which just has those letters in it.
Okay.
But yeah, Braille is a bit more challenging to learn for adults because you just have to get that finger sensitivity and to be able to memorize what the different dots feel like.
Yeah,
But there is still a lot of interest,
and you were
which is
saying
great.
that like older people sometimes struggle too because they have less sensitivity on their fingertips and
Yeah,
you struggle.
yeah, that's a challenge. But it is so great that people are interested in trying it because uh, being able to read aloud in Braille or even to just be reading the signs or elevator buttons that are there that are available
Right.
is really empowering.
Yeah.
And earlier you had said you assist people with assistive technology in person. Do you go to them or do they come to you, or is this all done at work within the office?
Pretty much always they come to my office
Okay.
or we do it remotely. There's a couple of outreach visits we do to different, especially senior centers, and maybe a few of the people live there who, they'll just have to go down to the lobby. But mostly it's at our office or like by phone.
Nice. All right, let's get funky. Let's talk about music. You're a musician, Skylar. Tell us about that.
That's right. So I was started to play piano from when I was about 7, and then I also played clarinet in the school band. I actually had to do marching band in order to be in the concert band, which I preferred more. And so sighted students would guide me for that part. And then uh, in my late 20s, around the time I got married, we started going so we're Catholic, and we started going to this church that has very traditional music, things like Gregorian chant
Yeah.
or singing uh, like classical choral kind of pieces, like Mozart, for example,
Okay.
uh, or ones even earlier in, which means parts. And I realized that I could actually sing it by ear without even really, you know, being trained on it or practicing that much.
That's cool.
And so I talked to the choir director about joining the choir, and he said that it was worth a try if he thought that I could do it by ear. And after a couple of rehearsals, I felt like I was a full member of the choir, and people have been really uh, good about the accessibility of it, like making sure I'm at the right place at the right time. We go up into a choir loft, which is upstairs, which does mean that people are not looking at me. Uh, and I can just focus on the actual music and not like the stage presence of it.
That's cool.
Uh, so yeah, I'm able to sing the Gregorian chant and even sometimes be the person to like start the song. Sometimes like one person starts the piece and then everybody follows.
Right.
And yeah, to me, it's like a Gregorian chant. It's an art form that goes back over 1,000 years. And I'm sure that many blind people did it, back in the day. But now that it's not as popular anymore, I'm not sure if there's any, I don't know personally of any other blind people doing it right now
Okay.
because it does take a little bit of a different sense of rhythm and melody and all that to be able to do it by ear. And yeah, I'm just really glad that it's something that I'm able to accomplish and it's I'm also interested in it like this issue with disability and religion too because there have been a lot of issues with churches being not as inclusive of people with disabilities, but when it works really well and it's like a lot of strides to be able to meet people and feel like we're contributing.
Yeah. Well, that makes sense to me. And you kind of touched on something that, again, I didn't really think about until you mentioned it, and that's stage presence. How is that for you?
Yeah, I found that challenging because uh I have been in other choirs briefly where I have had to actually get up onto a stage where I have to be in the exact right spot for the formation and that kind of thing. And then same when I was in band and in school. And I definitely find that more challenging. And so I am glad that I've had those experiences, but I feel like, in order to do it, I would have to be really passionate about what that group is doing, and I felt like, part of it's just being really busy with other things is, those kind of choirs tend to take a lot of rehearsal time too, or musical groups. But, for me, I like this, the way this loft works of, not having to worry about it, making sure that I stand correctly and, people are kind of scrutinizing that.
Right.
And of course, the loft might not be accessible to people with certain disabilities, so that is an issue, but uh,
Yeah.
it has worked well in my case.
We've had similar experiences when we've visited a couple of churches, and just because churches are tend to be older buildings, a lot of
Yeah.
them don't have the best ADA, or kind of a, we call it like a stapled on or like duct taped on ADA,
Yeah.
just to meet
Right.
Well,
basic
and
requirements.
I think the thing with churches or like religious places is they're technically not required, I think, to have accessibility like under the ADA because it's a religious thing, right?
I'm not
I
aware.
forget the exact wording of it, but I remember seeing that a while ago on some article about ADA, about the ADA.
Yeah.
It may
Yeah.
vary, maybe, but
Yeah. And it's a tough one because like a lot of churches will have a few people with a disability who are really successful there. And so they might, like, even me, like I'm very glad that I have been successful there, but I have to remember, well, what are some of the other requirements, like ADA issues that might be there that
Yeah,
might not apply to me but could apply to others.
right. It's like I've noticed with some churches, they don't, their disability section tends to be towards the back, and it's not an actual pew. It's just ta like chairs or a table that they have back there.
hmm
That's closest to the ramp a lot of the time. At least in my experience. It could vary.
There's also like I'm being driven usually, and so walkability of the neighborhood around the church is something that if I did live alone, that would be a bigger issue.
Yeah,
Like or I mean not even living alone. Maybe if I did, I would get a ride from somebody. But people have very different social supports. Depending on whether they've been able to fit in well there, and
right.
so that is always an issue.
Hmm.
Makes sense. Yeah. Well,
I'd,
something that you had, yo, did you want to say?
or was it about the Burrow printing?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
Uh,
because I find it fascinating. It's
Yeah,
because you don't need it because you could do everything by ear. But
it's very for Braille music. It's very tough to learn and very tough to actually read while you're doing anything. So I
right.
guess I forgot to mention what I don't have the words in my head. I have the music in my head. So I read the words out in Braille, but not the music. I think it would be very hard to do both. And I think a lot of blind musicians uh, end up doing most things by ear. I think even including a lot of pop ones like Stevie Wonder, who I actually got to meet at the last season conference I went to.
That's so
Oh
cool.
yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
What was he like?
yeah, it was very quick. It was fun. I was right in the middle of a really intense conversation with somebody about uh like philosophical books or something like that. And then the sighted woman who was with the person the woman I was talking to said, "Guys, I have to interrupt. Stevie Wonder's right here." He said, "Shake his hand and get a picture." And so he just said we both happened to, she was also a musician, the person that I was talking to. And so we both got to say that we were musicians and we really, you know, appreciated his music. I'm not really an expert on his songs, but obviously I know a few of the hits. I think he doesn't really tour anymore or like do a lot of music. He's kind of done more of like philanthropy and that kind of thing.
hmm
Hmm. You bring up some interesting talking points that often get brought up in the musical community because I am not the strongest sight reader, and I tend to do everything by ear most of the time. And there's this huge, it's always the classical world versus the jazz world where there's jazz musicians are split whether sight read or a combination of sight read or all ear or ear sight read this that, and then the classic world you have to read, and it's like
Pretty much,
always
yeah.
it's this constant battle whether which one's wrong, which one's right, what's the best way to learn, what's all these things. And it's some people develop very passionate opinions on those on those things. So like there might be someone out there that can sing lot like with the Braille, and some people, it's always really interesting to like it's just it adds a little bit more complexity or a little bit nuance to the topic that I hadn't really thought of. Like, oh, cool.
Definitely. Yeah, I'm always nervous to try and join a new group in the classical world. I definitely have to prove, they might be a bit skeptical that I can actually learn by ear. And I guess it also does take, like I said, I have to be really passionate about what that group is doing. So there have been a couple of groups that I've kind of stuck with for a little bit and then kind of drifted away after a while. Uh, like I did sing the Mozart Requiem, and
Oh,
that was
cool.
a lot of
Sick.
fun.
Yeah, Requiem's are
Yeah,
really cool.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly. Well, it was actually the first date with my wife was going to a concert of the Mozart Requiem,
Oh, that's
so
so
Oh,
cool.
it's
yeah,
special.
yeah.
And yeah, I'm definitely interested in that. That there is a jazz pianist who also plays some classical music named Marcus Roberts. He actually, I saw him in concert last year in Santa Barbara, and yeah, he would be interesting to have on. If I don't have a connection to him personally, but he played in Santa Barbara again last week, but I missed it. And
Okay.
so he's a jazz musician primarily, but he talked from the stage about how jazz and classical it really should be compatible and
Mm,
really interesting.
cool. Yeah, because like I tell people, because there was a moment where I was doing jazz guitar with a local group through the community college, and I tell people I would just kind of cheat read
Yeah.
because of jazz. Sometimes the tempos are so fast, like the chords are all over the place, where I just kind of dumb it down as much as possible. And most of the time, the composer, the director doesn't really care because
Gotcha.
the guitar isn't usually because there's a piano and it's not necessarily the front like one of the frontmost rhythm parts, right? Because the piano can handle the rhythm, then I'm just kind of there to accent it.
Yeah.
So there's no need for me to do these like giant arthritic like chords at like 120 tempo, right? It doesn't make any sense. But that's kind of a bit of a privilege because me understanding like, oh, I could get away with altering things, but a classical musician would probably get mad at me only playing half the notes or kind of
Yeah.
like
Getting sloppy.
not necessarily sloppy, simplifying it,
Yeah.
understanding like, oh, there's a bass player and like, there's I could get away if not playing the root. It would,
Yeah. So we're back from a little hiatus.
I had to take a quick little break, but it's all
Yeah,
right.
it's all good.
Life happens.
So we were talking about your journey with music and your experience with singing Gregorian chants with your church, and that was really cool. And I think what we wanted to talk about next was your background with your political science PhD. How did you kind of know you wanted to do political science? What was that like?
For some background, so I went to a public schools starting out in the New York City area. And then when I was 9, we moved to Redding, California, which is my mom's hometown. So I had uh, good experience in school. I always really enjoyed history. I was really interested in like how the system that we have to be today came to be the way it is, and
Yeah.
especially what are some of the reasons why there's different political parties, different social movements, and so I always enjoyed studying that. And uh, I went to St. Mary's College of California, which was it's kind of a private college where we kind of chose it. My parents and I kind of chose it because of the smaller class sizes. I thought that might be easier for me as a blind student. And when I was a sophomore, a blind professor came to teach at our college, and his name was Hisham Ahmed. I'm actually going to make sure to send you an email with an article about him, which I meant to do.
Yeah.
Hisham Ahmed was a Palestinian refugee. Which, of course, Israel-Palestine is a topic that's being discussed a lot right now.
Right.
And even 15 years ago, there was there were some smaller wars in the region, and it was already a pretty intense topic in political science. I actually went to a lot of events related to that when I was in college. And Hisham was blind since birth. He grew up in a Palestinian refugee camp, and then he was able to kind of be flagged as a gifted student, and was able to study at some of the universities that they do have in the West Bank, and then also got a scholarship to study in the U.S., actually at UC Santa Barbara.
Wow.
And so I applied to UC Santa Barbara as one of the schools that I was looking into for grad school because he had gotten there. So he was a great mentor to me. And, we think about what different people have gone through, whatever you think about how to solve the Israel-Palestine conflict, it's very clear he went through more suffering than and deprivation than what a lot of us go through here in the US.
Yeah.
And he always wanted to fight for the people who were still back where he was, but he also was really involved in the peace process, and he warned about Hamas becoming too radical of a group, and possibly causing a lot of damage too. But it was also really critical of the Israeli government. He really wanted the peace process to go forward. So he was definitely an influence, but he was also someone who I could talk about technology with, and we would help each other with downloading books on the computer, and it was really interesting to hear what some of his struggles were in like the accessibility of academic life. So when I was in graduate school, I found that I did need some help with some of the more quantitative parts, like statistical software. So like Hisham, I really enjoyed more of the qualitative, like trying to figure out based on history or based on looking what other sources were saying, uh, what made sense to actually analyze. Uh, so I was interested especially in how you could track whether interest groups, like for example, religious groups, social movements, labor unions, business groups, like how influential were they based on what they were saying to Congress, what they were, trying to get other people to do politically,
Yeah. That's interesting.
what media attention they were getting. Uh, so that's what I was writing about. And I also had a blind professor at UC Santa Barbara, Amita Huja, who's from India.
Uh-huh.
And he's still working there, although I think he travels a lot. Hisham Ahmed unfortunately passed away a few years ago, quite like in his 50s of cancer. So if not, if he were still alive, he'd be really, really interesting to have on this show.
Yeah, no, I bet.
Uh,
That's so cool that you just got to experience a mentor like that and got to work with them and be with a person.
Definitely.
It's really
Yeah. So I finished my doctorate in political science. By then I had gotten married and my wife is sighted, and she has her doctorate in English literature. So we got married toward the end of our graduate school time. And so I taught college classes. And in some ways it was going really well. I was really glad that I finished my doctorate, but I also started to burn out on writing. Part of what worries me about writing is, you know, you have to get rid of a lot of what you've written in order to revise it. And then if you publish it, or what if somebody doesn't accept the publication? Or what if even if it's published, not many people read it? And I wanted to try and find something to do that made more of an impact. And So when I got my downsized from my adjunct job, I was looking into you know, doing more like research for a nonprofit or think tank.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, my wife had gotten a job at uh, as a librarian at Westmont College, and so we wanted to stay in the area. And so I ended up really needing to find any job, and the Braille Institute position came open, and I've come to really enjoy being in the blindness field. In fact, actually, if I did go back into academia, I now think I would probably write a book about blindness in the U.S. and some of the different organizations for the blind and of the blind. When I was in grad school, I thought that I would not do much disability studies, but now I think that I probably would. I, I would like to at some point do more with that.
Yeah, that's cool. No, I relate. When I was growing up, I I studied psychology. I was a pre-psych major at UCLA, and that was my like career path I wanted to go through and just become a psychologist, uh, with the idea of like wanting to help people. And we talked about this the other day, me and Udi, with a friend of ours. Your goals kind of tend to evolve and change. I think as you get older,
You're right.
you grow and you realize what's really important to you. And for instance, I had a similar experience, going to UCLA and not working out with my caregiving staff, being reliable enough, and having to move back home and go to the local community college instead. You know, I had to go through this long journey of going in circles just to get my associate's degree. And I realized, there's a lot of hurdles that we face as people with disabilities. And as I got older and finished my bachelor's at ASU in communications, I've wanted to like really double down and focus on, you know, how people communicate, why we communicate the way we do, and how can we communicate better. And again, it's just another kind of influence for the podcast. So
Yeah, that's great. We all kind of find ways to adapt. And so yeah, for me, I like living in at UC Santa Barbara because it's a fairly flat campus, and I was able to find good housing and good uh, friends locally.
yeah,
Uh, but I think my leaving uh, academia, like there was a little bit that had to do with disability, but I think most of it really was the job market. There's lots of cited, academics without any disability or visible disability at least who you know really struggle with the job market. Some have to move different parts of the country every year for several years until they figure out what they want to do next. And so I wanted to avoid that.
Yeah, there's not necessarily a guaranteed game plan post academia,
yeah,
Right.
oh shoot, like right, especially like Dominic and I talk about this where it's kind of you're put in a position where yeah, you have a degree, but how do you use it to your benefit,
yeah,
right? And sometimes you might have to use it as some sort of leverage to get into a field that's adjacent to what you want to do, but it might not be exactly what you want to do. And then like
Right.
people change over time and you could find your interests change, it's life's a little it's not a clear path,
right.
but
Yeah, I do think in my current job I've been able to use some of my skills with I analyze data about uh which workshops and classes are the most popular. uh I have been able to get the Braille Institute a bit more into advocacy, with networking more with some of the other organizations for the blind. And then there is the Santa Barbara Access Board, which has been
Yeah, yeah. No,
good.
we're gonna segue into that next.
well before I had oh
Yeah,
gosh, I had a quick question. Um because that's really cool that you do that because I believe we had mentioned it's somewhere in the document, but I believe, or maybe we had mentioned it last time met was how the Braille Institute is underutilized.
yeah,
Or at least I
severely.
think Dom said, right.
Yeah, I heard on a separate like radio program that it's their services are like severely underutilized. Correct, Skylar?
Yeah, it's true. I mean, I did a little bit with the Braille Institute when I was after I moved to Santa Barbara, but not a lot. And I think, yeah, if there had been more outreach, like people reminding me that I should try to come in and work with their technology instructor who was there before me, I probably would have done it with enough direct outreach. And so yeah, we have to figure out like how do we follow up with more of the people who come in once. What I did get from them was and from the Department of Rehab, which was the most helpful, was a mobility instructor to kind of show me what are some of the best routes to get around the places I need to get around.
Oh, that's cool.
Wow.
Yeah.
I didn't know they could do that.
Yeah,
Well, it
mobility.
makes sense. That's
Yeah.
cool. Wow.
Yeah, so it's not even just the basics of how to use the cane, but also planning routes most efficiently and like figuring out which landmarks and dangers there are on different routes.
Gotta figure out the meta. That's cool.
Well,
Yeah,
I
exactly.
mean,
Yeah.
it's cool. I mean, that's why I like this show. It's the stuff like that. It just
It just piques the interest of nerds like us.
yeah, because I didn't know they had that. It's super cool. Oh wow. Um and just for the audience, like a really quick rundown of what the Braille Institute does.
So yeah, we talked about some of my technology work, which is with phones and computers.
Right.
And we do have Braille instruction, although it'd be great to find more people to actually learn to teach Braille. That is a challenge. But we also have a low vision occupational therapist uh, who's very useful for people who still have some vision left and want to figure out how to use the vision they still have, while also figuring out where they do need to adapt to more of the blindness skills. We have a social worker who can develop more of a comprehensive support plan. We have cooking classes, uh, and like what are called independent living skills groups. We have both in-person and online classes and workshops that can be about almost anything. Some of them are more like enrichment that doesn't have anything directly to do with blindness. Like for example, art and music appreciation and current events and things like that. And social support groups. I'm leading a men's group on Friday mornings, which is hybrid, meaning some people join uh, from our center and some join online. There's also more general support groups. Like there's a Thursday morning coffee group at the Santa Barbara Center, which is a lot of fun and a great way to socialize. And yeah, so it's a lot of different programs, but they're all free of charge.
Oh, that's cool. Dom, you and I go grab some coffee,
I'm so
socialize a
down.
bit. Yeah.
Yeah, it'll
Oh,
be
that's
fun.
really cool. Thank you. And now we were on the Santa Barbara Advisory Board.
Yeah, the Santa Barbara Access Advisory Board. Tell us a little
Right.
bit about that and how you got involved.
Yeah, so when I moved back to Santa Barbara in 2021, so I guess to step back, I lived at UCSB for a few years. Then when I got married, we moved to Ventura for a few years. And then in 2021, we moved back to Santa Barbara. Uh, right before I got the Braille Institute job, I didn't have it yet, but it made it a lot easier uh, looking back now. And so some of my new clients from the Braille Institute told me about the access board that they were on, and there were seats coming open. And so I was able to be appointed by the city council, uh, even though I was fairly new to town, which is, really, I guess it's showed that I had a solid resume, and they were pretty confident that I would stay in town, which was probably one of their main concerns, if of anybody who might have wanted somebody else. So I attend a meeting of 7 board members 4 times a year. It's like a 3-hour meeting. The last one was last week, and then there'll be another one in August. And we hear presentations from different city officials and guests that they might want to bring in. The 2 areas that I work on the most are the city website and sidewalk accessibility, including things like audible pedestrian signals where the light talks to you, any obstructions that are on the sidewalk. So until recently, there was another totally blind person on the board. Now there's still a low vision person, but some of the other members have more disabilities where they might have more trouble walking, and so there are areas that I kind of remain fairly quiet on. Like I try to support, from an advocacy sense, like, support what they're doing by voting on a resolution about that. Like, for example, there's one man who's in a wheelchair who drives. And so his one of his main concerns is accessible parking spots so
Yeah.
that if a car uh, has some specific adaptations for someone in a wheelchair that he's able to park and get out. Uh, it's not something that I know a lot about. I'm not really able to, rattle off what the dimensions of a parking spot like that can
Yeah.
be. But I know that, if we all need to unanimously vote on something that is a resolution about that, that I'll be there for him. And
Yeah.
he's also there to, if there's any issues, regarding blindness accessibility. So it's been a great way to meet other people with a disability in Santa Barbara, uh, and to be able to speak out on issues that are more concerned. One of the major ones early on when I first got there, I kind of got there toward the end of the worst part of this, but on State Street, which is like one of the main downtown streets, there would be restaurants that would leave their tables all the way across the sidewalk to be able to have more outdoor dining. And so
Yeah.
it made it harder to get a cane or a wheelchair through that area.
Yeah, no, I've been through situations like that where
Yeah,
we were talking about this too. Sometimes there'll be a car parked
Oh, a pet peeve of mine.
that's got their uh front hood
Well,
over the sidewalk.
how do it's
And so it
yeah,
makes the sidewalk space smaller and I can't always get by sometimes with my wheelchair.
yeah.
That's a big
It's like
one.
because the sidewalks sometimes
definitely.
3 or 4 feet wide, and what happened? People get when they're parking their cars, they try to get really into their parking space, and the
Yeah.
front part of the car just
Which
is in
which
the way.
which is more a problem, I guess, with the size of the sidewalk then, right?
Yeah, some of them are just
Right.
very narrow,
Yeah.
but you don't really think about it because there's a few spots in town where if people park too far forward, you only have like maybe 2.5 feet of clearance, and you can't really get a manual wheelchair through there.
Yeah, and it's like a huge pain in the ass because
Yeah,
as a wheelchair user, you have to go back down the curb that you initially came up from,
right.
go onto the street, and go around the back side of the car,
Yeah. And
which
so
not
you
only,
never know, like maybe it's someone who's just going to come back in a minute and you can just wait, or is it going to be
Right.
someone who's going
yeah,
to be stuck there for hours? And
yeah,
so, yeah, that's more of the issue for me. But yeah, it is like for me, it's kind of like sometimes I can go into the street and go around it, but it's not fun. And other
yeah,
blind people who might be less confident might be, completely blocked off by it.
yeah. Well,
Right. It's
it's
just you don't
it's
really expect it because if you're walking with your stick, like your cane, and you hit someone's car on accident, it's like, oh shoot,
well,
I wasn't expecting there to be a car
it
there.
just doesn't seem
Yeah,
safe to like have to go onto the street in the first place and go
Right.
around.
Yeah.
yeah, exactly.
On a similar note, when I was in high school, I participated in the school's talent show. And I did my quote unquote stand-up comedy. Or no,
You sit down.
sit
You
down.
sit down
How could I
comedy.
forget? I'm so stupid.
Yeah. No, it's
Sit down comedy.
been a while.
And I remember when we parked that night, my grandma dropped me off, and there was no available handicap spots available to park in.
At the high school.
It was at the auditorium here in town.
Yeah.
Uh,
In Solvang.
yeah, in Solvang.
Right. Oh, that's right.
So there was no empty disabled parking spots. And for me, like I need at least a disabled spot to park in or two regular parking spots
Well, a side loader, but
because I have a side loader. The ramp comes out the side of my van, and I need the space for the ramp and myself to get off the ramp, right? And
Ever try taking a city bus? Because I
I
know that there
have,
are wheelchair ramps for those in Santa Barbara. That
yeah, I have taken city buses. I have some beef with them too, to be honest.
oh,
yeah,
I've had a
yeah,
bad experience or two. Um, But this time in high school, my grandma had a park taking up two spots because there was no, handicap parking.
right.
And so we got back from the talent show or whatever, and somebody had written on the side of the car, "Nice parking, asshole." And even though like we had the handicap placard up and it's just like The world needs more empathy.
What's if they didn't know,
Yeah,
right? Like, yeah, that's
yeah,
crazy.
it's really frustrating that they would just make the assumption that it was, not something that was needed.
Right.
Well, if you have like a handicap placard up, too, like I don't know, you'd think somebody would see that and be like, oh,
Well, this is why shows like this exist to maybe that one dude
yeah,
that did it is like, oh shoot, maybe looking back on and like, oh man, because you never know.
yeah,
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 it's
Yeah, exactly. And yeah, I know that some of for the city buses, so yeah, the transit center has to always keep in mind disability issues because there's the wheelchair ramps to load the wheelchairs on. And then for me, it's more of an issue of knowing what bus number it is.
yeah.
Uh, and yeah, one time uh, I did get on the wrong bus and there's several different possibilities for why it happened. Either they didn't hear me and then they said, yes, this is the right bus. So now I kind of try to have them repeat the number after me.
Okay.
Uh, or they didn't read the number correctly just because they weren't thinking. And like they thought they wanted to think they had read 4 when really they were reading 1. Or maybe they did it on purpose. But I think it was probably a misunderstanding, like either a hearing issue or a reading issue, like on their part.
Yeah, you hope,
I
right?
know. I was just thinking
Yeah,
because when it comes to public buses and public transportation, a lot of the time it's issues like that Skylar had brought up, where a lot of it's just kind of human error or miscommunication.
Yeah,
yeah,
The driver might be fairly new, and it's things like that just happen.
yeah. When one time when I was still at UCLA, we went on a trip, me and a couple classmates to the LACMA, the Los Angeles County Museum of Art, and we took the city bus, and I got strapped in and everything on the bus. It was all good. But then at one point on the way back home, the bus driver stopped the bus at a stop sign or whatever. Uh, and my whole chair like tipped forward because
oh
Oh,
no.
they didn't properly apparently strap me in correctly.
yeah.
So it's tough because like
Did it hurt badly?
it didn't really hurt. It was just scary because my whole chair tipped forward and I hit the banister in front of me. Like, do you guys know what I'm talking about? There's like that banister at the front of the bus. Uh, and so my chair hit the banister, which kept me from falling, all the way forward over, thankfully. But then I fell back with gravity and kind of hit my head real hard
Right.
on my headrest on my chair. And it's just, yeah, again, like hopefully it's just as simple as human error. You hate to see stuff like that happen.
Yeah, it's good that ADA accessibility, like for the wheelchair and all that, it exists, but like,
Yeah,
it's just it's not like science. Everything can be improved upon over time.
yeah,
And sometimes people
Exactly.
make mistakes. It's like there's like quite a lot of factors at play,
yeah,
you
for
know.
sure. But yeah, all right. Well, before we wrap up here, we just want to run through a couple more things with you, Skylar. You told us that your hobby as a teenager was that you were a Wikipedia admin. So tell us about that. That's pretty cool. That's
That's
like really unique.
that's right. Yeah. So Wikipedia was founded in 2001, and I founded, I think, in 2003. I
Right.
was 16, and yeah, I think at that time, I it was a more stressful time. With some family issues going on, some not feeling like I fit in socially as well as I would later. I
Yeah.
mean, I did have friends in high school, and I enjoyed band and a few other things, but I would spend a lot of time by myself, and I found that I was able to look up information that wasn't already in Wikipedia articles. And just adding it to Wikipedia, I realized that it was a growing site, and I realized that I could contribute by adding all this information to, like, for example, for about half the US senators at that time, I actually was the one who started their articles.
That's so
Uh,
crazy. Yeah.
I think, I don't think, maybe even Joe Biden. I need to actually go back and check to see that. I think he already had something there, but uh, and then people started to notice my work, and I was voted on as an administrator, which was a lot less of a complicated process than it is now. Now there's a lot more vetting, but it was pretty much I made 1,000 edits. I hadn't made anybody mad. I figured out some of the major formatting issues, workarounds. And so then I started to patrol what was called new pages. And so if people would start an article about like their friend in high school or their garage band or whatever, or some short story they were trying to publish, I would delete it and I would warn them not to write articles about non-notable topics again.
Yeah.
I also would try to I found a way to figure out whether a page had been vandalized and be able to look at the recent versions of it. Like I would
Oh, okay.
I would look in the what are called the diffs, which are like the differences between the last revisions. And I knew if Jaws said minus minus or plus plus, I would know that something had been added or deleted.
Yeah.
So I was able to be one of the top anti-vandalism people for several years.
That's just so cool. It's so niche. Like I've never before you met a Wikipedia admin.
Yeah.
Like it's cool,
Well,
man.
it's really cool. Thank you for your service because that's a pretty cool. Well, it's a unique and interesting job, especially
Yeah.
combating
Yeah.
misinformation and combating idiots trying
Yeah.
to like fake,
Okay,
articles about themselves.
here's the real question.
Uh-huh.
Are we within our bounds of being, noteworthy for having our own Wikipedia page on the disability myth?
Yeah, yeah, there are Wikipedia articles on podcasters. So, Joe Rogan has, somebody went
Oh,
into obsessive detail about his, his entire life and his podcast and things like that. A lot of the major ones will have articles. So I don't know if there's a specific notability thing about podcasts. Like, do you have to have a
yeah.
certain number of ratings or?
Honestly, I'd be happy if a reference. Yeah, like just to be on a reference page, that's fine with me.
Oh yeah, like a list of
That's fine.
disability podcasts or something. Yeah, I'll have to look into that.
All right, well, final topic we wanted to kind of just go over was what's it like being a father? Because I have no
Yeah.
idea. Udi
Like,
has no
no.
idea.
Yeah, yeah, I did not expect, for a while after we were married, we were interested in having children, but it took a while for us to be able to have a child. And I was so worried, honestly, that, about how I'd be able, because I grew up as an only child. And, after I was a kid, I was not really around kids a lot on a regular basis. Uh,
Yeah,
but my son has really, like, we have found ways to bond. Uh, Especially with music. It turned out that he really felt relaxed by a lot of the classical music. That's my favorite. So
that's cool.
in, that's been amazing. Like so since he was about 3 weeks old, I've been the one to get him to sleep. It's like I'm able to kind of rock back and forth, talk to him, uh, playing music. And so now that he's talking, uh, very verbal, we'll also kind of talk about our day, and sometimes I'll put a video on for him or something, but like that, but or read a book. But there's there's so many ways that he's really, you know, from an early age, he was able to really figure out that something was different about me.
Yeah.
And so even before he could talk, we would play ball and he would just instinctively help get me the ball if it was in a spot that I wasn't expecting.
Okay.
And so that's been great. And I think it definitely has helped. There are people where both parents have serious disabilities, or there are single parents, or kinds of situations. For me, I think it has helped to have a sighted wife. She does a lot better with the clothing types of things.
Yeah.
There are fewer messes. She definitely trains him on putting things away that or cleaning things up in a way that I would honestly just not catch on to for a long time.
Yeah.
But we're able to kind of relieve each other, like each, you know, take over for the other parent, you know, and we each have things that we're really good at doing with him. And so yeah, now, uh, yeah, Peter, probably about the age of 2, he actually started saying, "Daddy's eyes don't work."
Daddy's eyes
Oh,
somewhere.
Yeah,
make sure the reminder, son.
yeah, yeah. And so once in a while, he'll say maybe they'll work one day. And I
Aw.
have to say
Oh,
that,
he's
yeah,
optimistic. That's cool. Yeah.
yeah. But he's also not overwhelming about it. Like I know that some kids will, you know, be, constantly bringing that up and or like, thinking it's going to happen right away or that kind of thing. But I think he does realize that it's not going to just be very temporary.
Yeah.
Mm.
And so he'll talk about showing me things
Hmm.
uh, and he really likes my Braille books. He likes he's
Hmm.
really interested in like my phone that talks to me, and so he just very very helpful kid, and yeah, and I'm really amazed that. So I think part of it is like, maybe our personality just happened to match well, but a lot of it is how we each gave him part of our personalities and trained him
Yeah.
to
Cool.
be helpful and but also let him be a regular kid too.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, all good traits for a kid to have. It's just I can't even imagine because the complexities of raising
Yeah.
this little human, right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Well,
exactly. We did put him. He does go to a daycare slash preschool type thing, but we didn't do that for the first year. We had some family help, but he's a really energetic kid. I think
I bet they call
like
it the
that way.
terrible twos, huh?
Yeah, and he does have times where he gets really upset about something, but I would say 80% of the time or more, he's probably, if anything, like really, really happy.
that's cool.
Oh, yeah.
That's cool. I can't imagine it. Like you said, just raising someone like, and I think just to kind of circle back, that it's a testament to what we talked about earlier, that there's more to life, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, yeah, exactly. And so yeah, well, we like to have conversations already, and we talked about another kid in his class who has a disability, like possibly trouble walking and talking, and we've been told he really tries to include him in things, and that's really good to hear too.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Awesome.
Yeah, man.
Yeah,
Oh,
One day we'll have to have him on the Disability Myth podcast.
that'll be fun. Yeah,
yeah, we'll be
yeah,
old
it'll be
and
holding.
gray, bald.
It'll be the legacy
Yeah,
episode.
Yeah.
yeah, I'll be missing. Yeah, the children of people with disabilities who may not be, may have certain, may not
Yeah.
have anything in particular.
Well,
Yeah.
it's just really cool that someone that young of an age pick up on not only like the social, but also like it's a combination of like the social ability and the empathy to notice that,
Yeah.
oh, this classmate is a little different and
Well,
like everybody treats them
and
differently.
that's stuff that some adults still can't do.
Yeah,
Yeah,
It's cool.
you know.
yeah, yeah. I mean, it's interesting. Like I always have been told that toddlers are very binary. Like they'll say yes or no. And so I asked, is your friend doing any better with walking and talking? And he said a little bit.
Hmm.
Hmm.
And I said, oh, it's interesting that you can already make that distinction. Like,
Yeah.
yeah,
That's
Yeah,
cool.
yeah, that's really cool, isn't it?
All right. Well, here we are. Any final kind of notes, comments, questions?
wow, yeah, we covered a lot.
Yeah, it was
Yeah.
really
Look
cool to
forward
talk
to seeing.
to you, Skylar. Yeah,
Yeah. You're just like a wealth of
Yeah,
information, experiences.
yeah.
Like I kind of relate to a lot of the people we've had on the podcast in a lot of ways because they're also somehow in wheelchairs a lot of the times. But with you, obviously, like we're both disabled, but we have very different experiences, yet very similar at the same time.
yeah,
And
exactly.
yeah, no, I just appreciate you coming on and giving us your perspectives. And yeah, it means a lot, man.
Yeah, thank you for your time.
Definitely.
Any final plugs?
Yeah. Thanks.
Braille
Yeah,
Institute.
Braille Institute. Yeah, yeah. If anyone does have is blind or low vision or have a family member who is, definitely go to brailleinstitute.org and you can sign up for if you're in a Southern California area, you can sign up for a local center or you can get our remote services.
Also, just want to mention since there's something I learned from your guys' talk with Outlook, uh, the fact that you can sign up for that app, right? Dart, is it Dart? Dars? It's like an Audible kind of app. Even if you don't have a vision problem, like For instance, people like me who have issues holding open a book, you
Oh,
can
BARD. Okay, yeah,
BARD.
BARD. Yeah, it's our Library of Congress. So Braille Institute is like the Southern California affiliate of the Library of Congress. And so, yeah, if you're blind or print disabled, they call it, you can either get a talking book machine,
Yeah,
where they'll send audiobooks like in a cartridge for free, or you can use the phone app and be able to download any book from that hundreds of thousands of books that are
Cool.
like professionally recorded.
there you
Wow.
go. There's your plugs.
Yeah.
Braille
So yeah,
Institute,
right now
BARD.
reading Country of the Blind by Andrew Leland. That's the book I mentioned earlier. So that's
Yeah,
on BARD. It's a really interesting, new kind of disability focused book.
perfect.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, we should put that in the description for others. Yeah.
Yeah,
To check it
Yeah.
out. Be
He's supposed to
dope.
be coming to visit the Braille Institute LA office in a couple of months. I might get to meet him.
oh, that's
Oh,
cool.
wow.
I wanted to make sure I I read the book before I
Right.
did this.
Yeah.
Sometimes I don't have as much time to read books as I used to. So,
Right.
Gotcha. Yeah,
yeah.
easy man.
Cool.
All right. Well, thanks
All
again,
right. Thank you
Skylar.
both. Yeah.
To our audience, thank you.
Yeah.
It's been a while, and we're glad that you stuck with us. If you liked what we had to say today, please leave us a rating, perhaps a nice little review on Apple Podcasts or a YouTube comment. And be sure to share with your friends and family on social media like Instagram, Facebook, and of course YouTube at The Disability Myth. And without further ado, it's been a while, but peace and love, and may the force be with you.
Bye-bye.
Yeah. And he'll get to that Wikipedia article to get enough ratings.
Yeah. Thank you.